it had a lot of happy thoughts. I have a lot of happy memories with the bell because it was the thing that brought us in from the field when we were working in the fields as kids.
You actually used it as a dinner bell.
It was a dinner bell, right. And when we were out in a cotton field or anywhere like that, the sound of the dinner bell was the happiest sound of the day because we were tired, hot, hungry, and the bell meant you could go. So you
would that be the end of work for the day? Or would
no, that'd be
you're talking about
lunch,
break.
right, for lunch break. But my mother, a lot of times, if she was with us when the dinner bell rang, one of the girls would be cooking lunch, and if my mother was with us, sometimes she had us to finish our road. But we were inclined, if we could get by with it, the minute we heard the bell, we'd throw our hoe down and make a dive, hoping that we'd get too far to be brought back, before, to finish our road. So this bell was in my home, and my mother died, and years and years later, when my dad was probably 80 or better years old, I asked him one day if he had if he cherished the bell. And he said no, it didn't have any great meaning to him. And I said, well, that's one thing from the home that I would love to have if he ever decided to part with it, that I didn't want it until he was ready to part with it, but if he ever decided he was ready to part with it, I would like to have it. And so one day, soon after that, he came up with it wrapped in a piece of Christmas paper, although it wasn't Christmas, and handed it to me and said he had something for me. And that was the old dinner bell. I don't know really how old it is, but I can't remember when this bell was not in our home and when it wasn't used for a dinner bell. It means from the time I was a very little child, that was the sound that brought us in from the cotton fields.
Now, I can remember that bell sitting around here, though. I mean, he must have brought it to you back before I was in high school, or
not
that long ago.
I hardly believe so. It was in his later years that he brought it and gave it to me. So it hasn't been here too many years, but I actually don't know when he brought it and gave it to me. So I just thought that's a nice thing for somebody to have, knowing its history.
So it goes back as far as you can remember.
Right.
You can't remember.
I can't remember when we didn't have the dinner bell to call everybody in. And on the farm there, you could hear it all over the farm. If we went out on the back porch when it was time to ring the dinner bell, and you'd take it and you could hear it all over the farm.
What is this?
That is my grandmother Eagle's sugar bowl.
Now, when did you get that?
I got it when my grandmother died in 1946. She died, and they had a sale of her personal belongings. And I saw this. It had been on my grandmother's table, and behind her table, she had an old log kitchen. And the logs were great big heavy logs, but they had a space between the logs, and they had made racks for dishes between the logs. And this sugar bowl sat between the logs back of her table there. And I'd seen it all my life when I'd eat at my grandmother's table. So when I saw this at her sale, that was a thing I immediately decided I must have. And a cousin of mine also had her eyes on it too, and she wanted it too. And so we hadn't talked to each other about it though, and this cousin was my chum when we were children. And so we started bidding against each other. And having not discussed it with her, I didn't know really, how important it was to her to have it. We bid along a little bit, and she stopped. And I got the sugar bowl. But she told me afterwards, several years afterwards, she says, I didn't bid any further, not that I wasn't willing to pay, but because I saw you wanted it so badly. So she let me bid the sugar bowl off. I think I paid about $2.30 for it, something like that. And I've had it ever since. The sale was in 1946.
Now I can remember this being around the house here when I was a kid, but I can't remember did we ever actually use it in anything?
No.
It was sitting up as a decoration.
Once in a long time I'd put candy or something in it, but I'd sit it high. Most of the time I did not even put anything in it for fear it would tempt you folks to want to use
Yeah.
it. You know. No, I never used it because I was afraid it would get broken.
Sure.
So it is still in perfect shape.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how far back it dates, except that my grandmother had it all her
Yeah.
married life, as far as I know.
I mean, to me, it's a very familiar visual image, but I can't
Right.
remember
Because
where.
you saw it here.
Would have been sitting up high in
Well,
the
you were
kitchen
only
somewhere?
3 years old when I got it, you
Yeah.
see. I got it in 46, and you were born in 43. So it's been in my possession that long, since 1946. And it's been sitting in my kitchen ever since, unless it was briefly carried off to another room for something. So that's my grandmother eagle.
And then here's your rolling pin.
Right. It's the only rolling pin I've ever had. I have never had another rolling pin in my life except this one. And it was given to me when I got married.
And you made pies with it today.
I made pumpkin pies with it today because Devon was coming. And I remembered he liked pumpkin pie.
Right.
So this was used today, but it's been used for nearly 49 years by me. It'll be 49 years this year since I got the rolling pin when I got married. Franklin's mother gave it to me. She had used it for many, many years, and it had come down from her ancestors. So this is the third generation at least that has used the rolling pin. And it's from Grandma Page's family. But as I said, I have used it for 49 consecutive years and have never owned another rolling pin. It's good and hard in case you want to use it for other things. One piece. It's a homemade thing, of course. Just the way they made that, you know, they had these machines that, what you call it?
A lathe?
Well,
is it a lathe?
A lathe.
I don't know.
Oh, I don't
Daddy, what do you make a rolling pin with?
Just plain wood.
I know,
I mean,
but
what kind of machine do you make it on a lathe?
Usually on a turning lathe. You'd have to have
turning
a
lathe.
with that.
Turning lathe. I knew
But
that.
you don't have any idea how long your mother had this.
You wouldn't know about a rolling pin. It was never used on him until after we were married.
But she did indicate to you that it had been handed down
Oh
to her.
yes, it was used by other ancestors, and I don't know how far back, but she was the second person to ever have it, and she used it for many years, and then I've used it for 49 years. So it dates back. It's a little bit small, but it works fine.
Let's break a minute. So what is that?
This is my father's school slate. Paper was a very, very precious commodity.
All arithmetic was figuring things like that.
My parents were raised in somewhat a state of poverty, although they didn't know it. And so all the children had nothing but a school slate.
You had to buy your own slate and take it in.
Your slate was a permanent thing. You might use it.
you had to provide it. The school didn't get it.
Right. But it would last you all your school years, you see,
Right.
once you got your slate. This is actually made of slate stone, but I don't know how they got it so smooth. Anyway, my father used this one. I don't know for how long, but evidently for most of his school life. He only went through 7 grades. And he hated to leave school because he loved school so much. So he stayed in the 7th grade a couple of years, just so he wouldn't have to end his school career. And this slate was what he was using when he finished school. About 1880. Didn't he get married in 82? No, wait a minute. That's wrong. Turn your machine off.
That's okay. But when was he born?
This is, the year was wrong there
Yeah,
because he was born in 1882.
Okay,
So he would have
been in
used the school in
from about
1890s to the
18.
early 1900s. This was used at least until the turn of the century or thereabouts because he got married in
Well, but-
1906.
But he wasn't still in school in 1900.
No, yes.
He was only.
He was 18. He was still in
They
school.
stayed in school a long time. The school year was very brief. Actually, I suspect he was in school 4 or 5 months of the year. Now, my
Mhm.
grandmother Eagle was only in school about 2 months of the year.
But he would have. What age did he start? When did he start? When did you start?
They
school?
started at about
About
6,
6 to
but they
7.
just stayed in school because 7th grades was all they could do.
Mhm.
And the years were very short, you see. They
Right.
didn't get an awful lot done in a school year. So he was in school until a few years before he was married. He was married in 1906. So I just heard him say he stayed in 7th grade for several years because he loved school and didn't want to quit. That was the only way of staying in school.
Right.